We have made it and survived yet another day. Good to see you. Welcome to Cooperville. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube, and we are live on Twitch. Wherever you are watching, we say thank you. Joe's already in the house. Look at this guy. Punctual as always. If I was going to give out awards, Joe, like you would get the award. Always here, always on time. Appreciate the dedication. We have a big show today. Super excited. Derrick Van Orden joins us in just moments. Retired Navy SEAL Chief. We have a lot to discuss in the world that is this giant rock we're flying through right now. So many things. Author, actor, grandfather, parent, Wisconsinite, all the good things. So really excited to talk to Derrick here in just a bit. Don't forget, and please thank you. First off, thank you to all who already did subscribe, but please support the free speech revolution that we got going on here on the show by joining our Patreon. We don't know day to day. Sometimes the shit that comes out of my mouth, I'm surprised they still allow us to be on Facebook or YouTube. So to support the show, you can join our Patreon. The link is in all the comments of wherever we are streaming. Really appreciate it. We're talking exclusive content, the podcast audio, and the apparel line. When we launch that here in a couple of short weeks, you'll get first dibs at our t-shirts and our ladies' tees and our hats. So a bunch of cool stuff coming up. Join the Patreon. Again, the link is, depending on where you are watching, you could be over here or over there or anywhere all around the square, depending on where you're watching. So appreciate that in advance. We had a great show yesterday. Big thanks out to Austin Bishop for being on. If you missed any of it, and again, like any episode, you can go back and rewatch them on YouTube and on Twitch, and make sure while you're there that you do subscribe. Thank you. We appreciate it in advance. It was a busy day today. I had a little bit of an emergency, I would say. It's the last night I get a call from my ex, who was where my son lives, up in the UP of Michigan. The dog was having some issues, and I was going to pick up my son on Friday after work. That turned into a 6-hour round trip drive up to Michigan today to get him. So if you happen to see a small child's head like peek into the frame, it's just Mini Cooper. It's just a little guy. He's going to be a star one day. Actually, engineer, MIT. I already got it figured out. I got him pegged for his future. So I have a video post that I'm going to put up after the show was done today. I was on the road, and if you ever made the drive from Chippewa Falls, Eau Claire up to Michigan, and you get through like the Chequamegon Nicollet Forest, there's not a lot. There's just not a lot of like, ooh, it's a lot of nature, which is cool, but there's just not a lot. Not a lot of cell service, not a lot of anything, not a lot of radio stations. So I got bored, and I put together like a 4-minute rant just about things, and I'm going to post that on our YouTube channel coming up after the show. So heads up on that. Should be cool. Should be super cool. We're gonna, there it is. And pull that down, and turn that way. So many screens, so little time. I was super excited. I reached out to Derrick Van Orden on Facebook, and as you all know, we have had Kyle Woodman on the show. We've had Jonathan Wickman on the show. Of course, we've had Kyle Yudes on the show. And so I nudged Derrick Van Orden a couple of times. I'm like, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. I love, all the things you're doing. You're out and about. You're making things happen. You're a man of action. And obviously the Navy SEAL thing, my gratitude towards our servicemen and women. So that was a huge thing. And I was so excited that he reached back out and set me up with Mary Pat. And then we kind of got it all figured out and arranged to get him on the show. Cause I'm super excited to have this man on the program. Derrick Van Orden is here. Thank you, sir, first and foremost, for your service, and secondly, for being on the program today.
You're absolutely welcome, and don't ever sir me again. My name is Derrick, and I'm a retired senior enlisted SEAL.
Fair enough. I will remove that from my vernacular for the remainder of the day. But so great to talk to you. And if people that are watching that are not following Derrick on social media, on Facebook especially, I know you got a lot of great content that you put out there, super active and getting out. But I'm gonna take you way back. We're gonna do the old origin story with you, because I was listening to a couple of podcasts that you've been on, and just was just fascinated by the trajectory that your life took on from a very young age, from your relationship with your mom, which is super fantastic. I love some of the comments you've made about her, and then we'll get up to the point where you were about to be a Marine, and then the next day happened, and life changed. So, because you're from the Midwest, was it Wisconsin or Minnesota? Your home.
I was born in Minnesota,
mm-hmm.
and in Minneapolis, and then my folks were divorced really before I knew they were married. I was that young. Mm-hmm. My father, quite frankly, was not an honorable man. Mm-hmm. And so I was raised with my brother by my mom in abject rural poverty. We moved in with my grandma for a while, and that's just the way things are sometimes, and it's unfortunate. But I learned a lot of things from my ma. Unfortunately, she died about 6 years ago now. Her name was Carol Ann Mulligan. Her married name is Van Orden, mine, clearly. Mm-hmm. But she's, the joke is she's 5'0" and harder than woodpecker lips, because she was. And she was so dedicated to making sure that she could provide for us. And I'm eternally thankful for that. But yeah, so that we moved down to southwestern Minnesota, and then she was one of the first female sports reporters in the nation, which I think is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, she was just so dynamic. But then she got a job with an insurance company called INA, which became Cigna Insurance, and then we moved to Wisconsin, to southeastern Wisconsin. Heartland's the name of town, and that's where I consider to be my home. And then she got promoted, and we moved out to Oregon, where she wound up managing the West Coast for Cigna Insurance. Fantastic. She had a nameplate on her desk. Oh, where's my camera? Right there. It said Warden Van Orden. I mean, she was. She was the businessman, and so we wound up in Oregon, and that's where, I dropped out of high school when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
Because I knew everything. I had it all. If no one laughs at that, they don't have a 16-year-old. So, I did. I was just a young, frankly, objectively looking at myself as a young man. I was just a foolish young man, full of hubris and all that stuff. Didn't have any humility, which is terrible. But so I kind of kicked around, and I've been supporting myself since I was 16.
Wow.
Got jobs and stuff, and then I went out with some buddies of mine. I still have this core group of friends from that period of time when I was in high school, which I think says a lot about their poor judgment, frankly. But so we went out one night, and I was with a friend of mine named Kurt, and all of a sudden we decided to be Marines. We're like, let's be Marines. I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And we're like the best Marines ever for about 6 hours. And then I woke up in the morning, and I'm like, hey, dude, I do not want to be a Marine. And he's like, I don't either. That seems really hard. And I said, let's join the Navy. And he goes, okay. So that's how I got the Navy. I drove over and picked him up, and we went to the Navy recruiting office and joined the Navy that day. Didn't know anything about SEALs, didn't know anything about anything, And I got a job. I was offered 3 career options: seaman apprenticeship, fireman apprenticeship, and airman apprenticeship. And those are all essentially just menial labor jobs. And I went back into my enlistment contract. I have a copy of it, and I just signed up for the Navy. No guarantee. That's a 3-week school of like how to like scrape paint and how to paint. I'm not joking. I mean, that was it. Like, this is how you get paint off of a piece of metal and put more paint on it. And it's got to happen. It's a ship, But so no guarantee of a school, no guarantee of a coast, no guarantee of a ship, I'm nothing. I'm in the Navy. And I know. After I sign that stuff, the recruiter just gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, we got a Van Orden." I don't know any better. But so what was terribly interesting, and I'll share this with you, is that for 2 years I worked on a tugboat and with some people, just wonderful Americans, wanting to serve their country. I was very proud to be with them. But I did straight up menial labor. I cleaned, 400,000 toilets and painted miles and miles of, ship. If you if you added it all up, barges and this tugboat and everything. And what I learned in that period of time was the humility I didn't have as a younger man. And the learning of that humility was the reason that I was able to graduate from SEAL training. So I had a friend, his name was Pat. I still have a friend named Pat, the same guy, who was a corpsman. He worked at the clinic on base, and he was always happy. I mean, like super happy. And I had this, my hands used this. This is before like gloves, like things like that, safety equipment. So I'd have this primer 150. It's an epoxy-based primer, marine primer on my hands, to the point where you just can't wash it off anymore,
Right.
And he was always clean and happy. And I was always, covered in paint and, mildly disgruntled. So I was like, I'm going to go be a corpsman. And I went and I started working off at the clinic in my off time. And I had a knack for medicine for some reason or other. So I struck. It's called striking for a rate, which means you're applying for a job essentially. And after a couple of years, I was selected to go to Corps School, Hospital Corpsman School. It's a medic for Army guys. And that's where I found out about the SEAL teams. This guy named Randy Dunn came walking in. He's a chief at SEAL Team 5. And his whole motivational speech. So just to put this in context, right now the Navy spends millions of dollars on recruiters and motivators. They're all around the country. They go to high schools, they go to colleges, they help people with workouts. They actively seek out these applicants for SEAL training, and then they help them get into training, and they help them get through training, right? Well, back then, this is 1991, they didn't care, like, at all. They're like, you want to be a SEAL, great. So Randy comes walking in to my my Corps School class, and he's like perfect physical specimen. You know what I mean? And he comes in and he puts his hand on his hips and he goes, my name is Chief Randy Dunn from SEAL Team 5. If you want to be a SEAL, come talk to me. If you don't, beep, you're probably going to quit anyway. And then he turned around and he left. That was his entire motivational speech. And it was like the best one I ever heard in my life. And I was like, you know what? I'm going with that guy. That's where I'm going to go, because that dude knows what he's doing. That person knew who he was, what he's capable of doing, why he's doing something. He had a very distinct, purposeful presence, and I didn't have that growing up. I just didn't. So I decided to go, to become a SEAL. And so I'm talking to these guys in my class, and it turns out some of them had joined the Navy to be SEAls. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go do that. And they're like, well, you can't just say you're going to go do that. I go, well, yeah, I can, because I just said I'm going to go do that, and I'm totally out of shape. And I smoked at the time.
Oof.
Because it's a big thing. And, the regular fleet Navy at that time in the 90s, you smoked cigarettes. And they're like, you, sir, are a train wreck. You are not compatible. Because I didn't even know what it was, what does SEALs do? But so I'm like, no, I'm going to go do that. They're like, okay, whatever the hell. So I went, and you had to take this class. Am I boring right now? I'm just trying
No,
to.
I'm so fascinated right now. I'm just like,
so this is the origin story. Okay, check it out. So you had to do this screening test in order to go to BUDS. And at that time, you had 3 chances to take the screening test. If you didn't pass it in those 3 chances, they don't ever want to see you again. Like, get out. Now it's completely different, agree or disagree, whatever. It's just different now, where they really shepherd you through this, and they give you no feedback at all. It's like push-ups, sit-ups, dips, or did you do dips? I can't remember. And then run, swim, 500-meter run. You had to wear boondockers, which are these weird Navy boots, in pants. And then you had to swim like 500 meters or whatever the time was. I can't remember. Anyway, so I could do everything but this swim. I grew up swimming, but I never did a formal stroke, and you had to do a side stroke or a breaststroke. Those are called underwater recovery strokes, and that's for when you go back into UDT, underwater demolition team times, and naval combat demolition guys back in World War II and through Korea and everything. They would swim in these things, charges and stuff to blow up beach obstacles and whatever, and you'd want to swim under, keep your arms under the water so you wouldn't splash. That's why it's called underwater recovery stroke. Yeah. But so anyway, I'm like, yeah, didn't know how to do it. I failed this test twice, just the swimming part, and I am PO'd, dude, because now it's personal. And we transferred barracks from Naval Hospital Balboa. They're like renovating them. So we moved to 32nd Street, which is another naval base in San Diego. 9-year-old kid in the pool doing side stroke. And, you know, I'm trying to teach myself this. And I see this guy, he's clearly doing a side stroke, 9-year-old. And I was like, hey man, can you show me how to do that? And he's like, yeah, of course. Grab an apple, pull the apple down. You can't really see it because the camera's better. Pull the apple down and then grab it with your other hand, throw the apple away, grab another apple, pull it down, throw it away. Guess what? That's the side stroke. And he's like, keep kicking the whole time. Like Roger Dodger. Like the only reason that I was able to ask a 9-year-old how to swim, trying to be this, you know, and I was ripped, dude. I mean, I was like Olympic shape. But I was able to ask a 9-year-old to teach me how to swim because I cleaned toilets for 2 years and realized there's nothing beneath you ever.
Right.
Never. And that has carried me through. It really has. I mean, that sounds like kind of a weird story, but when you realize that anybody around you at any time, you know, that's not even a generalization. Anyone around you at any time has got some knowledge that you don't, that if you're willing to humble yourself and ask and then listen to the advice. I mean, I wrote a book about this essentially. You're going to be better for it, and they're going to be better for it too. Yeah, I mean, that's like a real deal. And then, you know, I got into SEAL teams and, so check this out. Here's something funny. So I get into buds and I'm like, wow, you're in buds now. And like, what does that mean? This guy, well, I'll tell you. So I get into buds like the first day. I'm not going to say this guy's name because I'm sure he's still alive. And it's just terribly embarrassing, but for him, not for me. So it's like 4 a.m. and you got to get all this stuff ready, you know? So they used to be green. So like the green uniform you saw in Vietnam and stuff, that's what we used to wear. And then when you got into the third phase, which is the final training phase, you got camouflage uniforms, is a big deal. Everything about you have to earn the color of your t-shirt, you know, all this stuff, right? But so you got to take these down. There's a dry cleaning place in Imperial Beach called it's oh my gosh, guys are gonna kill me. I can't remember it. I'll think of it. Anyway, it's AB Brights. It's called AB Brights. Those are the people that do all the uniforms of bud students, what they used to. So they starch these things where you could literally, not an exaggeration, you could take your pants and stand them up and they would stand by themselves. That's how heavily, I'm not joking. That's how heavily starched they were, right? And that lasted for like 8 seconds because then they threw you in the ocean. But so, and you got to pay for this stuff. And you know, I shine my boots and whatever. And so it's like 4 a.m. We're standing out in this little courtyard at the 602 barracks, or was it 618? Was the, these are like the building numbers. It's funny how this stuff is ingrained in you. And this guy comes up to me who he's a rollback. So he had completed some portions of training, then he got injured and he's still there. So they have, you know, like the secret knowledge. And he comes up to me and like looks at me up or down, and he goes, "You're never gonna make it." And I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? I just got this uniform and everything, and got up really early today. Do I leave? You know, I was like, what? Come on, man. So it turns out this guy winds up in my boat crew, and I'm senior to him because I did a couple years in the fleet. So Monday, so you start on Sunday night breakout. Monday afternoon, you do these things called hygiene inspections, where you like strip on these bike shorts essentially, and then they look at you head to toe because bud students will not admit when they're hurt. You know what I mean? They won't admit that they have these skin infections and all this crazy stuff because no one wants to get thrown out of training. So and they stink. I mean, they're bad because you have to lay on the pavement. Oh my gosh, the way they think of these things. You lay on the pavement, or if you're on the beach, you lay on the beach, but you have to like spread your fingers apart and your arms and everything, so you can't touch any part of your own body because that adds warmth and then they'll spray over you with this very fine mist hose or the solid hose. If you have your choice, get sprayed with the solid water, not the mist. It's less cold. But so they do that, and you lay there for like 2 hours on cement, and I've got this picture that someone took. It's really cool because it shows the shadow of this barracks building, and they make you move so you stay in the shadow, and your fingers are like, here's the sun, like right there, and they make you move, and you're like, oh please, it's just mind-boggling. Anyway, so this hygiene inspection goes on, and then we go back out to the beach, and then they just hammer you on the beach while you're waiting for everyone else to get done. And I'm like, where's this guy in my boat crew? Where is he? Like, he's gone. Dude quit. First hygiene inspection on Monday. The same guy that walked up to me and said, "You're never gonna make it." You know why? Dude didn't have humility. Just didn't. Anyway, so I get done with Hell Week. It's kind of a big deal. We go to the galley. That's a restaurant. It's not really, but that's what they call it. And there's a whole bunch of corpsmen in my class. The SEAL teams were really short on corpsmen. I swear this is the only reason they let me in there, because I was a corpsman. So they're like, oh, let this guy go. But so there's a bunch of corpsmen. We look over there, and there's Chief Dunn in his car parked. And so we all go over there because we're waiting in line to get in to eat. And he's sitting in his car, and we walk over there, and he looks at me, and he goes, "You made it through Hell Week?" I was like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did." He's like, "Oh, well, of course, congratulations." I knew it all the time. He didn't, man. So, then I went to the SEAL teams. I went to SEAL Team 4. And at that time, we were regionally assigned. So those South and Central America. I spent about 5 years working around there. Did my first combat deployment actually to Bosnia, which, they call it a combat deployment, but I swear it's more dangerous in Chicago. It literally is more dangerous in Chicago now than it was there. But that was, the only war we had at the time. And my view on things are, if you're going to do something, you should really do it. And so a Navy SEAL's natural environment is combat. That's where we belong. So I did that one, and then I finished the Army Special Forces Medical Sergeant's course, the 18 Delta program, which is incredibly challenging. There's always the inter-service rivalry, and we talk smack about each other all the time, but the Army Special Forces do some things remarkably well. And one of them is this 18 Delta course. It's very, very hard. But I didn't want to go finish this. I had to do 6 months of that thing down in San Antonio. The first part was in that time it was called the 301 program. But I didn't want to go because I wanted to stay in the SEAL teams, So I was like, I don't want to go. Army guys. And I was like, I'm going to stick it to them. Right? So I was like, how am I going to do this? Make them really angry. Aha. I will beat them at their own game. So I applied myself incredibly seriously academically, because this is a very, very academically challenging course. And I was the distinguished honor graduate of my class. So the battalion commander had to give me their excellence coin. And it was just like, Navy guy. I'm like, gotcha. Granted, I spent 80,000 hours studying, but so I did that. Then I transferred out to SEAL Team 1, did a deployment out to the Pacific. And one of the, I still have very, very good friends from there. But during that deployment, I got a phone call from a friend of mine. And Dave is his name. And he was like, "Hey, Brad's dead." This was in 1999. Brad's dead. And I'm like, "What do you mean Brad's dead?" Brad Tucker. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Yeah, he's dead, man. He went out of a helicopter in the Bahamas at 120 feet going 100 knots or whatever. At that point, the water's like cement." But let me tell you about this guy. I in memoriam for this dude. He was half First Nations, half American Indian, or something like that. And he used to babysit our kids. at the time, and he taught him how to sumo wrestle. This is what a punk this guy didn't never let a SEAL babysit your kids. So I mean, we came home, Sarah and I, we're dirt poor, living on nothing, and here's the kid sumo wrestling, like the full on slap the thighs, bam, and it's like, what did you do, Brad? He's like, this is great. He taught me how to box. Just a wonderful person, wonderful, wonderful human being. He just was. But so what was? I mean, this is going to sound really weird, but I'm thankful that I was able to experience the loss of a friend and a teammate prior to, these wars kicking off. Because there's been 100 and some SEALs and Naval Special Warfare people killed since September 11th. And statistically, we have borne the vast majority of casualties for the entire Navy. And from the Department of the Navy, the Marine Corps has unfortunately sustained more casualties than us. That's just because they're bigger than the SEAL teams. That's the only reason. But so it was for me personally, it really opened my eyes. I always, accepted the fact mortal danger and whatever, I get that. But to have, someone that you really loved, frankly, killed in the line of duty, prior to having, these waves of people being killed, Extortion 17 and the stuff with Marcus Luttrell and those cats. And it was, part of a maturation process. But so I am thankful for that. And I'll love that guy, my deathbed. He's a father and husband and, all that stuff. And then on that note, and we'll get off because it's kind of depressing, September 11th happened. And then I got another thing when I was at work, and it was, we sustained our first casualty, in the first overt casualty, the first uniformed service member killed. His name was Neil Roberts. He was at Damnick. RPG hit the helicopter, went out of the helicopter, fought on the ground. My graduation picture from Buds is the two of us standing there with our arms around each other. It's just bananas, right?
No.
But, those things are things that we have to remember, because the debt that is owed to their families doesn't expire. It's not a mortgage. You know what I mean? Right. And we have to do that. We have to pay, homage to these people as often as we can, because they have children. And they need to know that, what their fathers died for, or their mothers. There are no female SEALs, but there's plenty of women that have died in combat. They got to know that meant something. So that's something that I don't think is not enough. People say we're never going to forget. They do.
Yeah.
People forget all the time. I mean, a little thing that I do, and I'm going to encourage you to do this, and all of your listeners, at 9:11 in the morning and 9:11 at night, which is 21:11 in the military books. Whenever I see that on a clock, I salute it. Every day. Bam. It's kind of a weird little thing. So I just throw that out there in case it's the morning. You're like, why is this guy saluting a clock? That's why. But yeah, man. So, what happened in SEAL Team 1, and then I went to Team 5, where I was a platoon chief. That is, SEAL platoon is the basic functional unit of any SEAL team. It's doctrinally, which we don't really do doctrine, is supposed to be like 16 guys, 2 squads of 8, whatever. But and then I went to Iraq, which was hot. But so this mission became declassified. You want to hear this? Is really cool. It's kind of a cool story. So in 2009, this mission became declassified. They wrote about it, and I think McCraven actually wrote an article in SOCOM magazine or whatever. But during the election period in 2005, the top 6 Iraqi officials were protected by Navy SEAL platoons that were dressed as contractors, and I was one of those. So, and I had this unit of guys, just total badasses. Sorry about swearing, but just, I mean, I was so proud of those guys. But so we randomly got this guy, check this out, all the code names were football teams. Guess what mine happened to be? Kick a guess.
Packer.
Yes. Wow. Good job.
Boom. All here.
You
All
did
day.
it. You did it. You did it. You're right. So it was Packers.
Hmm.
And this guy's name was Ibrahim Al-Jafri. He was a family physician who was clearly an Iraqi. He was a Shia. He fled under Saddam, who was a Sunni, lived in Iran for 20 years or whatever, wound up in England. He had one wife, although Muslims can have four. He had one wife, 6 kids. Really interesting, great guy. Spoke English fantastically. There's a term in Arabic, and I can't remember right now, but it's someone who's memorized the entire Quran, and he was one of those guys. I mean,
Wow.
that's a big book, right? But so he was a deputy vice president, and we went through the election cycle. He was a member of the Dawa party, and he became the first democratically elected prime minister of Iraq in its like 5,600 year history. Wow. And I was hanging with this dude every day.
Hmm.
And it's just fascinating how these things take place. And we went up to visit Jalal Talabani, who was he's a Kurd, he's a Kurdistan. And the standards are different there. Although they're Muslims, they're much more westernized. And so they have places to go out and eat and everything. You didn't have to wear body armor, you didn't have to carry a rifle. You know, I'm down in the real Iraq, where things are shifty, right? People are trying to kill you all the time. And it's, you know, it's stressful. But so me and my lieutenant were like, hey, let's let the dudes go out to a restaurant and eat dinner and just enjoy themselves, not human beings, for a little bit. So we took the overnight watches for the prime minister. And well, he was still the deputy vice president at the time. So this guy comes busting out. His name was Adnan Filfil. Filfil is pepper in Arabic, and he had a really hot temper. And he was the doctor's chief of security. I love this guy, Adnan Filfil. He comes busting out. I'm sitting. It's like 3 a.m. or something, and he goes, "Derrick, how is the government of the United States structured?" I'm like, "What? I'm like, okay." Well, I grabbed a piece of printed paper and went straight back to Schoolhouse Rocks. Not kidding. I'm like, there are 3 branches of government. Here's the judicial, executive branch, and the Congress, and these how they function. They're co-equal, and I've drawn this map and everything, and it's just like I could have burst out into song from a cartoon. And he's like, "Thank you." It takes this piece of paper back in with the prime minister, and what they were doing was, at that point, they had realized, because they have a democratic parliamentary system, they don't have a constitutional republic like we do, is they were figuring out how they were about 80% sure at that point that the doctor was going to become the first prime minister. And they were trying to figure out how they're going to structure their government. And they went up going with a British parliamentary system, because Iraq used to be a colony, essentially, of England, you know. And so I just thought that was so fascinating, that like random 3rd grade cartoon that I watched, because I never thought about politics ever. I never thought I was going to be in politics. It just didn't occur to me. But to have this dude come out and, sketch on a piece of printer paper how our government is structured, and then have him go in and have that be a real portion of a discussion for an allied nation's structuring of their government. Not a lot of people have these experiences, but things like that seem to happen to me on a regular basis. It's kind of weird. So I did that in Iraq, and then I went to another Naval Special Warfare unit. It's not really, a topic of discussion. Did some very good work there. Came back and became a troop chief. I went to Afghanistan before that. My first tour to Afghanistan. That was fascinating. I want to, for some reason or other, sometimes or for a few deployments, I kind of worked by myself in a different capacity. Kind of leave that one there. But and so then I went back to Afghanistan as a troop chief, which was fascinating. Another great group of guys. I just, if you think about like gratitude,
Mm.
you know what I mean? If you really think about all the things we have to be grateful for, I just ran for Congress. I don't know if people know that, and I lost, right? I lost, but so many positive things happened during that race, man. So I take my faith very seriously. I was raised a nominal Catholic, and I was essentially a heathen, honestly. But I take my faith very seriously now. So does my family. And during the campaign, we found a home church. I hadn't really had a home church like 5 years since I retired. We lived way up north, and just, nothing really clicked with us. So now we have a new home church where I get to go and worship God as I see fit, which is, kind of a thing in America, which has been attacked. Congress shall make no law establishing religion or the free exercise thereof. That's the first part of the First Amendment. So that I met thousands of people that are just awesome. And I got to see what I think. And listen, dude, I've lived and worked on 5 of the 7 continents. And I've been to Australia, did like 9 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever in New Zealand. And I haven't been to Antarctica, but I've been to all the rest of them. And I don't mean like flew in and stayed at a resort. I mean, I'm living in them. And this region, the Cooley region, or the driftless region, depending on, how you want to describe it, where I live right now, is the most beautiful portion of the entire planet.
Wow.
And I get to live here. I mean, come on, right? So we have to take time to really understand that, even though there are clearly I'd rather have, won this race, because I think these people are destroying our country. They are in real time. But there's so many positive things that came out of that. And if we don't take time to be grateful for that, man, you're just going to be angry your whole life. I refuse to do that. I don't want anybody listening to this or watching this just to be angry. Just don't do it, man. Find the positive stuff, figure out what went wrong, fix it, and crack on. It's that simple.
We've had, absolutely. And the gratitude thing is something that resonates with me big time. And it's something I bring up on a lot of these shows that I have on, because I think that is, in whatever aspect of life, is waking up in the morning and saying, whew, all right, I get another crack at this, no matter what happened yesterday, and then, to globally put it into perspective, like you have, having seen the worst of the worst and living in the best of the best, being super appreciative of that, the fact that you get to wake up every day in the place that you want to wake up, be able to pray the way you want to pray, and give thanks the way you want to give thanks. It's like when we talked about 9/11. It's one of those things that people forget. Like everything gets taken for granted. Everything is, if you can't capture your attention in 6 seconds or in 256 characters, then it's in one ear and out the other. Just it comes and goes so quickly. But to be able to take time on a daily basis and just say, I'm so thankful that I am here, I am free, and I get to live another day in this country, which affords me opportunity to do a bunch of things. And I think when you start to do those kind of practices and make those a part of your morning routine, I'm a big morning routine guy.
Good.
You start to make that a part of your routine, you start to see the things clearer that are happening that are wrong. Like you're like, I'm so thankful, I'm so blessed, I get to, live in this free country. And then you go, I have some questions about why is the freedom being attacked here? Like I'm super grateful that we have it. Why there was this piece of paper they wrote by candlelight with a feather in the dark, and they came up with this great set of outlines of how things are supposed to make it great. And it feels like some people have forgotten that exists, and they should read it, and the law of the land. And I know your Facebook page is a great source of sharing a lot of that information. I know you're also out supporting candidates that are out there on the current cycle, which I think is fantastic. I want to jump back one thing on Navy SEAL service really quick, because
it's cool.
It's super badass. So let's not. And I have become super some sort of gravitational pull towards guys like you I just listened to a great podcast of Marcus Luttrell where he really went in depth and talked about his story. And about Marky Mark. It was weird. Like things got awkward for it. I'm like, wait, it's a lot of time on Marky Mark. I know he played you in the movie, but like,
and Marcus Luttrell is about 3.5 feet taller than Marky Mark. Just so you know, Marcus is a big dude, and Marky Mark, Mark Wahlberg, I respect tremendously.
Yeah,
and the great other guys. This is one of the best movies ever. But sorry, just had to throw that out there.
No, I get it, and guys like David Goggins and Jocko Willink, all these former Navy SEAL guys who have really come.
People.
What's that?
I know all of those people.
Well, it's a brotherhood, and that's the thing that they all really bring up is there's obviously a brotherhood of those who have served, those who have served in combat, and then there's the SEALs. Mm-hmm. It's the frogman thing. It's going through buds. It's Hell Week. It's all the things that you have to survive, and being the group that civilians are like, well, it just doesn't make any sense. We just need these savages. I'm like, no, we need the savages. Like we need the guys that are without fear, that are willing to go and do the stuff, because without them, we don't have this. And for some reason, that is a tough correlation for some people to make. Like, no, we need the savages. We need those who are super highly trained and can go in and be in the dirt and make the things happen.
Right.
Because without that element, most of us have not experienced war. And the reason we haven't experienced war is because of those in the military and the SEALs who carry out these, special operations and do the things that obviously there's plenty of stuff that you can't talk about for good reason, but there is another element of gratitude. And I have a couple of my family members who are in the military or in the comments jumping on here, talking about a great conversation. Oh yeah. We have somebody talking about pants. Let's see. 1990, Fort Dix, New Jersey. No joke on standing pants there either. So they're talking about the starching of their pants. Heather Miller.
Yeah. People are like, you're joking. I'm like, no, I'm not.
So much starch, but there is that gratitude, and then to have SEALs come out and tell the stories, and really talk about the unity within the brotherhood.
Well, you know why that happens and why that's so compelling is because that's what's missing in our society today. People, they want to hear stories of kindred spirits and bonding between human beings. That's why that is so fascinating to people, because our society, unfortunately, has really become, this splintered group of people where even though we have common values with people, we have so much more in common with each other than we have not in common. That's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, all that stuff. We have so much more in common, but we have people in office, unfortunately, and in the media and social media and big tech and all that stuff that are driving wedges between us because it sells newspapers, man. And so we look towards groups of people where that doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist in the SEAL teams or in the military, of course, that's a very broad statement. Of course, there's, cliques and all that stuff, but wherever you go. But the reason it doesn't is because the people in the military put something above themselves. It goes straight back to that humility thing, brother. So when you are able to subject yourself to dominion, which I believe in dominion, not the voting machine. Had to throw that out.
I was like, I think he's talking about a different one.
God dominion, right? Sorry, joke. But when you subject yourself to something and you willingly sacrifice a lot of your constitutional rights, free speech and all that stuff. Let me be super clear. Those military folks that have been speaking out against civilians and trying to be the arbiters of civilian free speech need to be thrown out of the military. They get out. The military doesn't run the country, Jack. Don't forget that. And I love the military. And you way overstepped your bounds, everybody, including Kirby, who's the Pentagon spokesman. This guy should be fired. That is inexcusable behavior. But so that's why people look towards the military. is because they understand that there's a group of people that are willing to do things that they're not willing to do, or they're incapable of doing. People have disabilities or whatever the heck it is. I do. I'm 100% service-connected disabled veteran. You know what I mean? I destroyed my body serving our country, and I do it again right now. And that's why they want to see that. And when you have a bond with people, you truly have a bond with them. And how do you forge a real bond? Adversity. The vast majority of the American population, which I'm eternally grateful for, haven't really faced adversity to the point where, like, I don't know if I'm going to get my legs blown off. I was talking to my son yesterday. We were driving around together, and I explained these times where I drove through a minefield in Boston, and the two people in the car with me. So I'll tell you. So I was a Joint Commission observer, which means that I lived in a house. This is immediately following the Dayton Accords, where the peace of the Civil War happened. International intervention. My job was to go around and talk to these people and figure out what the heck's going on. Then I'd write a report and they'd read it, and it's called providing a ground truth to the commanders, the military term for it. But so this guy who was a Croat, but he was delivering building materials back to these villages so that the Serbs that lived there could rebuild their homes. Because what happened a lot in the war is that people would go in and they'd like pull the wires out of the walls. They just stripped these houses. So anyway, he was delivering this, and people were mad at him because if the Serbs moved back into the communities that they fled, they could shift the vote totals for the municipal elections. I mean, this stuff is really crazy, man. And so they're like, hey, we got to kill you. So they put a tank mine on this road that they knew this guy was going to be driving to deliver these building supplies. And they have, I don't know if you've seen these European trucks, but essentially the driver is sitting right over the tire. Have you seen those? It's like a little mic, okay. So he's driving one of those, anti-tank mine under the tire, do the math, right? So we're like, oh my gosh, he killed this guy. I hopped in the car with this guy named Nikola Pedulo. He was a Croatian colonel, lieutenant colonel. And my Navy SEAL buddy, I'm an E5. The SEAL other guy I'm with is an E7. He's a chief. I'm the junior man in the entire country from SOF, like the junior guy, right, by far. And so we drive out, like, hey, we'll go, see where this is, check it out, interview the people, see what happened, because we're trying to maintain peace by providing information to decision makers. So I'm, envisioning we're gonna drive out on the tarmac, like pavement, and this truck's gonna be right off the road. Oh, easy day. No, it was like 3 clicks in on this dirt road, like that they just put a mine on. It's like, I'm like, this is not okay. So I drive all the way out there, these cats in the car, and I don't get blown up, so I know the road's good, right? And then it was tragic. The truck looked like if you were to shoot an orange with a shotgun. I mean, it was just bad. Yeah. Anyway, so we go out there and we do our investigative work, speak to people. At that point, anyway, so we got that done. Now I got to go back. And I'm like, I can't drive 3 kilometers backwards on this, twisty little dirt road. Right. So I'm like, I got to turn around. And I'm like, going to drive through this field right here. It's the only place to do it. Well, it's a minefield. And I'm like, so I kid you not, these dudes, this Croatian colonel, lieutenant colonel, and my SEAL buddy, like, bye. They hop out of the truck. They stand on the road. And I'm like, what? What is this? So I back around, and it took me a few minutes to realize, what they did was the right decision. 100%. Yeah. That if someone's going to get blown up, it should only be one person, not 3. Unfortunately, I was the one that was going to get blown up. But I don't know why I told you that. It was just kind of a funny story. The strangest things happen, man, when you're in the SEAL teams or in the military. I mean, we can just do this. Oh, I was talking to Danny about it. That's another thing that's been very awesome about this campaign is our son just got accepted to grad school. One of them for biblical exegesis. Very smart young man. Greek and Hebrew and that sort of thing. But so that guy, he's awesome.
Yeah.
The SEAL chief, we have a bond that's never going to be broken. We have a story to tell that's eternally funny. I mean, it could have turned out really bad.
I was gonna say, it depends on whose perspective. Like his story is a little bit different. He's like, "I'm out." You're like, "All right."
Yeah, I don't know if you would tell it that way. Be like, "Well, I made a tactical decision to limit the amount of potential casualties." You're like, "No, you jumped out because you're afraid." I get it.
Hey, E5, you go do that. You go back out of here.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the story. It's great, man. Yeah.
But you've had a chance, in an illustrious career, 26 years. Many of those, overseas in precarious situations. So again, thank you for that service to our country.
You're 100% welcome.
Coming out of that, you've kind of dove into a lot of different arenas.
Sure.
I mean, you've had like the ultimate life experiences in the things that you've accomplished in the military.
It ain't over yet, Jack.
No, we've only just begun to define ourselves. So, I mean, Derrick, not sir, Derrick. But they, doing some consulting, having kind of an independent consulting firm, helping out with Fortune 500 companies, diving into acting. How does one take that turn into like, yeah, I'm gonna do some acting. I think that'd be fun in Active Valor amongst others.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. Let me tell you a story. In 2005, Donald Rumsfeld said, "I want 500 more SEALs, Secretary of Defense, because we were incredibly effective on the battlefield, just flat out, just doing America's bidding." Right. So he's like, "I want 500 more of you guys," and all the officers are like, "Yes, sir. Crank that out for you right away." Because that's what they do. And that's why you can never call me sir. I'm just kidding. I have a tremendous amount of Navy SEAL officer friends that are just some of the finest human beings you're ever going to meet, but I just am obligated by law to make fun of them. So they're like, "Yes, sir, we're going to do it." And so the following year, the net gain of SEALs after combat losses, guys just getting out of the military, retiring, all that stuff, was one. Like, one. So you're 499 out of 500 short for the Secretary of Defense. Super awkward conversations ensued. Well, this guy named Duncan Smith, who is one of my best friends, he's just a great dude. He's a captain, retired as a Navy SEAL captain, very handsome guy, and he'd been in the entertainment industry doing stuff because he was a reservist for a while and whatever, But he's like, "Hey, wait a minute. Remember when they made Top Gun and everybody joined the Navy? That failed to mention you have to have a college degree to be a pilot." But they
skipped over that. I was part of that. I'm like, wait, what? Like I can just go and be a pilot?
Read the fine print. Unlike I did when I got to the Navy. You know what I mean? So they're like, "Hey, let's make a movie. Let's make a movie." And they're like, "Okay." SEALs are nonlinear thinkers. They're like, "That's a great idea." So they did. They solicited a bunch of production companies and studios and whatever for scripts. They wound up choosing the Bandito brothers, which is defunct now, unfortunately, at this point. But all those people are still my friends. And they said, "Hey, we're going to do this." So I'm a troop chief at the time. This is right before I went to Afghanistan for the second time. And they came out to our desert training facility, these Hollywood guys. And Duncan shows up, and I think at that time I had like 53 or 56 SEALs out at this, remote location. These people planned an entire day, drive out from LA, and then spend the day interviewing people who want to be in this movie, right? Because everybody wants to be in movies. So I went in to the guys and said, "Hey, look, there's a book called The Finishing School written by Dick Couch. I'm a fictional character in that book, and I did not want to do that interview." I said, I was an E6 at the time, and my chief came in and said, "There's this guy, he's going to interview people, and you're going to interview him because the admiral wants you to be interviewed." And I kind of want to do it. He goes, "Maybe you didn't hear what I said. Admiral, right. So my name is Nick Kunkel, I think, in that book. So having that experience, I was like, no person within my sphere of influence is going to be forced to do anything they want or they don't want to. Not going to happen on my watch. They'll fire me or whatever. So I told Duncan, I'm like, hey, look, dude, I'm going to go talk to all the bros right now. And if they don't want to do this, you're not going to say anything to them. And he's like, Roger that. He is a very good man, Duncan Smith. He was under orders to get this stuff done. But he understands what the heck is going on. So I go in there, I go, hey, look, man, guys, if you want to do some of the work that I did previously, you may want to really think about this. If you want to go to, different commands and whatnot, this is a fully sanctioned Naval Special Warfare Command effort. So it's good to go through the Navy. But if you want to do some other, sensitive stuff, you may want to think about it. And they're like, okay. So they show them this movie, and this is cool because Hollywood goes, like, this is so cool. Like miniguns, boats and all this, everything, blowing up things. They're like, this is rad, because this is rad in California, right? Well, you know what? These guys are literally preventing us from going out to train to do what they're showing us a movie that they think is so cool. Like, because we've got to sit here and watch a movie about what we're trying to go do, right? So no one volunteered. Zero. Just none.
Out of 56.
Zero.
Wow.
So we got like 4 hours to lunch. You know what I mean? And we have a training regime. Everyone goes out through training. I'm sitting there with my task unit commander and these guys, and we just, Duncan's in there, and we just started talking like we're doing right now. You know what I mean? At an unclassified level. Just talk. And then they pack up, they go back to Hollywood or whatever. We finish our training 5 weeks later, something like that. And I get a call from a guy named Tom Brown, who unfortunately just died. He's a retired admiral. At that time, he was a captain. He's a Commodore. Very good man, friend of mine. He just last month, April, he died. I don't know, I have a lot of friends that died. But so he calls me over. And it's not a good thing when the guy who's in charge of the entire coast of the SEAL teams calls you over to his office. You know what I mean? To talk to you personally. Now, I did a very specialized mission set in the Horn of Africa. So I had a much more personal relationship with this guy than you normally do between an E8 and an 06. But so we knew each other, because I reported almost directly. It was a weird thing. But anyway, so I knew the guy, right? He calls me over. He's like, hey, Vano, those Bandito guys, they want you to be in a movie. They want you to do it. And I was like, hey, Commodore, you can't order me to be in a movie. He's like, hey, Vano, you're right, I can't. I'm like, okay, well, thanks for the talk. And he's like, oh, this is how smart this cat was. He goes, oh, why don't you go home and ask Sarah Jane about it? And I was like, okay. Sure. It's a weird conversation. But so I go home and I'm dinner and I'm like, hey, honey, remember those guys that came out from Hollywood? They want me to be in that movie. And she was like, well, what'd you tell them? I said, no, I'm not being in a movie. I'm not an actor. I'm a SEAL. Not happening. She's like, oh, okay. Well, maybe if you did that movie, your kids would know why you spent so many years away from home.
Oof.
That, my friend, is how your wife tells you to be in a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, bam, from the top ropes. So,
wow.
yeah. I tell you what, I'm punching above my weight when it comes to who I married. She's amazing. But yeah, so some of the good things that came out of the movie is, number one, it was 100% effective for recruiting. Totally. It takes over a year to get a slot to even try to go to Buds now. And remember my origin story. They're like, oh,
it's a little different.
Yeah, you're okay. There's no way I would ever get accepted to even try to go to training now, right? So that was good. Another thing is that I personally, and I know a lot of SEALs hated that, and I get it. Okay, roger that. Whatever. Have your opinion. But we get to talk about our jobs to our families now, because we never discussed anything about being a SEAL with my wife or my kids. My wife was the ombudsman for 2 different SEAL teams. That's the formally informal position that is the liaison between the commanding officer and the spouses at a command. And we still never talked about work ever.
Wow.
So, because you just, you don't do that. Clearly, we never discussed anything classified, but even just like, what are you doing for, like, what do you do? What does it look like to dive? What does it look like to parachute? Shooting guns. What type of external stressors are applied to you during combat missions? How does the mission planning cycle go? All that stuff you never talk about. So that was beneficial. So a lot of these, SEALs, they're like, "Oh, why'd you do that?" Guarantee you they got a copy of Act of Valor now.
They got the Blu-ray, they got the DVD, they got it all.
Yeah. So that led to, that was done on duty. I mean, we were on orders to do that. That we didn't get paid for that. And people are like, "Oh, you're a millionaire. That was the most successful movie." It was the #1 movie in America. We didn't make any money at all. The people in the movie.
Right.
The production company made $56 or $58 million. And I do it again because it helped get people into the SEAL teams, and we need SEALs. And I swear we have to think globally. And I don't mean a globalist because I'm not a globalist, but I mean, we need to think external to ourselves. And what's the purpose? This organization that I absolutely love, Naval Special Warfare, I would, do anything to help that organization. Yeah. So then I led to 2 other movies that I made.
Yeah.
Which is just fun. I decided to write a book.
Yeah. I was going to talk about the book.
Okay, let's talk about it.
I love the title. I love the title. A Book of Man, a Navy SEAL's Guide to the Lost Art of Manhood by Derrick Van Orden. That's powerful stuff, man. That's opening with that. Your wife was off the top rope. She was off the top rope with the chair. Like, bam, she came out. Yeah. This is off the top rope. That's coming out swinging. I love it.
Yeah. Well, the idea for this book occurred to me in a place called Pichidungi, Chile. And it's Chile. It's not Chile. Oh, it's Chile. Like, no, it's Chile because it was cold. Okay. It was cold there. And we had an afternoon off. We were training with, are those guys the Buzos Tacticos? And so we packed up some like bread and wine and things in our rucksacks because they have fantastic wine in Chile. And we hike up this mountain right off the ocean, and we go through the cloud line. And I was the intelligence rep along with being the medical rep for I don't know how many platoons, a lot. So I had these cameras, they weren't digital; they were all film. So I go off to take pictures of stuff, and where I'm going to, and the guys are sitting there. It's cold, and I'm like, "Well, start a fire for Pete's sakes," busted. So I go off to take pictures. I come back 20 minutes, half an hour later, wherever it is. There's no fire, and the guys are all standing there. And they're doing when a kid does something they're not supposed to do, they'll kind of lick their feet and shuffle their feet. And I'm like, holy beans, you dudes don't know how to start a fire. 5 active duty Navy SEALs didn't know how to start a fire in damp conditions. But then it occurred to me, what? They're all city kids. They're just older city kids. So I grew up with nothing. You know what I mean? So my biggest concern growing up during the summer was scratching up enough change to buy enough BBs to go wander around in the woods. I mean, that was like my major concern. So I knew how to do all this stuff, and they didn't. And so I was like, holy wow, look at this. How has our society changed and the culture changed since the time of our grandfathers or even me at this point? And so it made me want to write this book. And there's a lot of practical skills in there. There's philosophical musings about the difference between being a man and a male. There's a big difference. Interestingly enough, a portion of that book was completely misinterpreted on purpose by the person I ran against and complicit media to try to make me look like I was a sexual harasser person. Which one of the things that I learned about politics is that there are some there's some people that are unscrupulous, and they're in leadership. And I'll call the guy out. His name is Ron Kind.
Mhm.
and he intentionally abused this book, and I was disgusted by it. The Journal Sentinel under Molly Beck wound up writing a story, which was actually a fairly well balanced story, but then the La Crosse Tribune picked it up and butchered it, removed exculpatory stuff. It was just horrible, and that's why people don't want to get in politics. Because I mean, anyway, so yeah, and my favorite part of the book. I'm glad I got that off my chest.
I
My
feel like you feel better.
Well, I mean, look, man, just why do
Yeah.
people do that? I mean, either you have a better idea for how the nation should work and how you want it to be shaped for your children and for your grandchildren, or you don't. And when you don't have anything to offer intellectually or policy wise, by definition, the only thing you can do is take away. And that's what I found from this other side. So you got nothing to offer, the only thing you can do is take away. And that's what Ron Kai did for however long. Anyway, so the back part of the book is called Campfire Stories. And that is my favorite part. And the portions of the book are written by people that taught me how to do stuff, because the function of humility is, finding people. We talked about this earlier. Find people who know how to do stuff that you don't know how to do, ask them how to do, and then take their advice. Like, for instance, my brother, Kurt, taught me how, not the same Kurt that wanted to be a Marine, taught me how to change a tire. So I asked my brother to write a section about how to change a tire. A friend of mine worked for a knife company. How do you sharpen a knife? So seeking out people, because finding folks that you can have a core group of people that you can rely on as advisors that you trust is very important. And again, we've kind of gotten away from that as a society. Anyway, so this back part, like one of them was written by a friend of mine named Manhood, which is cool. We just had like a best friend argument today, like full on, which I love. But he writes a part that's like, okay, if you could right now go back in time, understanding that you're going to have children and you're going to have male children, how would that change? Excuse me, how would that change your behavior patterns, understanding that your children at one point are going to understand how you acted? It's an incredible thought experiment. This guy named Hank Paul, who was Stephen Paul, is a very good friend of mine. They're producers on Hollywood, and he produced the movie I did with John Voight. But he was a young guy married to Dorothy. She just died a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But he got drafted to go during Korea, and he's like, well, you know what? I didn't want to go to war. I just got married. We're out in New York, but my country needed me. So he went off to war. But here's what's interesting. So they had like this line. It's really weird with this camera. They had a line like, this line went to Korea and this line went somewhere else. And he was in the somewhere else line. So you know what his job was in the Army? I'll tell you, because you're never going to guess this. He was one of the guys where they detonated the nuclear bombs, and they had the soldiers in the trenches that got up and walked into the blast. That was his job in the Army. And you're like, what? But here's what's cool about it, man. He did his time, got out of the Army, didn't gripe, didn't do this, didn't sue the thing, didn't have this victim complex of, oh, woe is me, and look what the nation did to me. But he did his job for the country like a man or like a woman. I mean, these things apply across the gender spectrum, you know what I mean? And by spectrum, I mean man or woman. So that was fascinating. And then John Voight, who is a total buddy of mine, he is so awesome. He's one of the best guys you're ever going to meet. He writes a part where he explains how he got duped in the 60s. So, he was a really big deal back then. He's an Oscar winner, when he's a younger man, and still he's been in like 8 billion movies. One of those awesome guys you're ever going to meet. But so the left was able to convince everybody that if we just left Vietnam, everything's going to be fine because America is the root of all evil. And this communist group of people, they're okay. Things are going to be fine. And that's what they thought. Jane Fonda, that idiot, went over and sat on an anti-aircraft gun. And I mean, come on. Yeah. So then in 1975, with the final removal, we really stopped combat operations. I think 73, and then the last, in 75 is when the embassy was evacuated. North Vietnamese roll in, and they kill a gazillion South Vietnamese people. You slaughter them. And John was like, what the heck happened? And he realized at that point that he had fallen for this narrative that America is bad. And so he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for that. And he was in the Army too. Did you know this? He's a National Guard guy.
Oh, did I know that?
So
that.
Right. He's like, I was the worst soldier ever. I'm like, I believe you.
I take you at your word.
Yeah. So that's just a neat part. Oh, another Dave Bell is another friend of mine, and he's a super liberal. He lives out in Oregon, but he's still a friend of mine because I'm an American. You know, we have to have friendships with people who disagree with us politically, or we're lost. You know, the republic will be lost. But he writes his part, which is cool because he was never in the military. But this is exactly how SEALs think: is that we don't gamble, no gambling. We take calculated risks. So there's a significant difference between gambling and a calculated risk. Gambling is like, let's do it. Rolling dice. Well, a calculated risk is taking in all the factors that you can possibly have access to, and then gleaning from them ways that you can potentially reduce the risk in order to accomplish whatever you're trying to do, a mission for sake. And then understanding that there are things that are external to your control that could very lead to your death or the death of your friends, and then doing it anyway, because the higher purpose of the mission is more important than your personal safety or your physical well-being. That's the difference between gambling and calculated risk. And this guy intuitively knew that. He's been a friend of mine forever. He intuitively knew that as a civilian, which I thought was pretty cool. So anyway, there you go. That was the book. And it was all the rage. I spend the vast majority of that book, honestly. Do not buy that book if you're looking for knife fighting Navy SEAL stories at all. They're not in there. It's mostly making fun of myself.
Well, in that case, is it available on Amazon? Because I'd like a copy.
Well, you know what it is, but those are all resales. So that book sold out. It did 30,000 copies, like boom, gone. And we're going to be working on a second edition coming up here in April. So wait for that one. But it's, you know what? It's an irreverent look at the world from my perspective of what it is, with some very good practical skills that are missing.
I'm gonna email Mary Pat and see if she's got a copy under a dust pile somewhere. It's building up. She might. I'm gonna weasel in. I'm gonna weasel in on that. I want to talk about December 18th. It's in bold print on your website as a day that changed everything. And a lot of the stuff we've talked about today is about your service to the country and about the moves in life that you made after that, and even mentioning during the course of this interview that like politics wasn't a thing that ever really crossed your mind. Writing down Schoolhouse Rock to help form the Iraqi government or give them some options. Like, here's an idea. Here's what we have going on. Singing some songs, but that not being on your radar. And then this day happens, and all of a sudden, there's a change in your direction. Tell me about that day and how it led to your run.
Right. Well, we moved to the 3rd Congressional District, meaning Hatter City, because it was closer to the airport in Minneapolis. We lived up in Butternut, which is a wonderful community in Ashland County. But it's very difficult for our children and grandchildren to visit because it's a 4-hour drive from Minneapolis, or an hour and 45 minutes from Rhinelander. So we moved down to be closer to the airport because we want to see our family. And so that changed. I was in Sean Duffy's district, a Republican guy, great dude. And then we get down and there's this guy named Ron Kind. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. He's a Democrat, whatever. Okay. So this whole impeachment buffoonery was going on, which it was. No other better way to describe that. Foolishness, unconstitutional foolishness. And so I write this guy a letter and I'm like, hey, Ron Kind, how are you going to vote for impeachment? It's fairly important to me. He came back to the district. He was telling people, I won't do that. And telling just everybody, I don't think this is the deal. He was the last person out of 535 members of Congress to make his vote public when he was forced to on the floor of the House of Representatives. He did that because he knew that his vote was going to be very unpopular in this district. Well, he didn't write me back, and I got steamed, man. And then he cast that vote, and I'm like, that's it. I sent a note to one of Sean Duffy's coordinators named Jim, a little email, or excuse me, a text message. I got to know them because when they came up north for his, listening sessions, or what these guys call them, they would come by Butternut and stop, and we owned the Butternut Cafe at the time, and they would get food from us. So it was this kind of strange connection. But so I write Jim, and I'm like, hey man, who are you running against this guy, Ron Kind? And he wrote me back, you. And I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Me?
Like, yeah, exactly. And then I went, ha, 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 a text message. Well, when someone doesn't write back when you go, ha, 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 in a text message, they're not joking.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, you know what? I talked to Sarah Jane about it. We prayed about it. And I was like, yeah. During that, the intervening years between my retirement, I sort of forgot that I was the guy that solves problems. You know what I mean? Problem identification, work on solution, apply solution, find new problem, fix it. Problem is Ron Kind. And I started looking into this cat. And I used to find people, in caves in Pakistan. That's really hard. It's really, really hard to find terrorists. It's not hard to find stuff on politicians because they have to file things by law and they make statements and all this stuff. And the more I got into looking into Ron Kind, the more I realized he wasn't part of the problem in Washington, D.C. He was the problem. The atypical or the typical stereotype career politician who's in politics for his own personal political power and financial benefit. And I was like, I'm done with this, man. I am done. So, I was fortunate enough to be able to assemble a very good team. Really, no one paid attention to the race. They're like, who's this high school dropout? I didn't get my undergraduate degree till I was 44, by the way.
It's a couple years later. It's fine.
Yeah. You know what? I got it because our youngest daughter was griping about how difficult it was to be in college. And I was like, look, I'm going to finish my degree because I'd gotten credits here and there in the Navy. I'm going to finish my degree as an active duty Navy SEAL. You got nowhere to maneuver at all. She has an art degree now. Right. So, people are looking at me like, who's this Navy SEAL guy? He has no chance of beating this 24-year Democrat incumbent with $3.1 million in his campaign war chest. I had zero money. And the only person in the district that knew my name was my wife. Not a joke, right? Seriously. They're like, this guy's not doing anything. Well, guess what? You form a high performance team, you can win. So we got, it was like just under 11,000 votes or whatever shy of beating this cat. Which, made some real waves around the state and around DC. And I would encourage, you mentioned this earlier, that, I've been going around recruiting candidates for school boards, for county boards, for town boards, for all this stuff. And you had Kyle on here, he's a buddy of mine. We got to do this. We have to make sure that our nation, it's the minimum requirement of a citizen of the United States of America to make sure that their children, or if they don't have kids, that their neighbors' kids, at a minimum, have the same amount of ability to choose that they did. That's your minimum requirement as a citizen of the United States. And I just made that up, a couple of years ago or whatever. I mean, that's really, if you distill things down, that's really it. And we're not doing that right now. We're not. We have abdicated our responsibility as citizens collectively to do that. And what I find fascinating is that the reason that you look at a lot of these local offices, why they're controlled by leftists, progressives, it's a foolish term, where you're progressing to, you're not, is because Republicans, generally speaking, libertarians certainly, we don't want government in our life. We don't want the government telling us what to do. We don't want to have to, adhere to all these edicts. So we don't participate in it at all. And Democrats, for some odd reason. You know, it's their lifelong aspiration to do this, to be able to, set public policy goals, which are essentially telling people how to live their lives. So they participate, and we don't. Every 4 years, we were all like, we're going to vote for, insert president name. That's what Republicans do. But I'm going to tell you, it's really hard because I'm on the phone.
Mine's over here. My monitor's over
I
here.
know. I was like, I'm going to tell you guys this, and it's counterintuitive. If you do not want the government in your business, you have got to get in the business of government. So by withdrawing or thinking we're withdrawing from government, we're actually allowing people to get into government that want to control our lives. You think about that, man. All the stuff that's taking place now. Hey, you know what? Joe Biden's not going to fix a road in front of my house. You know who is? My county supervisors. That's who's going to do it. You know who's going to raise my property tax? Not Joe Biden. That's a state issue. So we have to be involved as much as we don't want to, if we want to make sure that our children, again, have at a minimum the ability to choose the same that we did. We got to do it, or you're abdicating your responsibility. And here's something else. Here's the harsh senior chief message. I've had so many people, say this went bad in 2020 and the election integrity and all this stuff, right? Totally valid, completely justifiable. But I'm over it. I'm over it. I don't want to hear anybody griping anymore unless I see your feet moving. You know what I mean? Right. You got, we've gone through the 5 stages of death here, essentially, and we have to get to acceptance and understand that what the left is trying to do is to keep us focused on the 2020 election so we don't look ahead. There's an election, a statewide election, April 6th. People aware of this? Kyle's up for election. You got Judge Gill that's up for election. Deb Kerr's up for election. This is happening April 6th, and they're trying to keep us focused on November 3rd of 2020. So that once again, we blow off these things. So Deb is running for the Department of, what is it called? DPI, Department of Public Instruction, right? It's essentially the person that runs all the schools. Well, we have children, and think about this, just think about this for a second. We have children and young adults graduating from high school that can't read or write. They can't read or write, but they can from rote memory tell you 150 reasons why America is the root of all evil. They can. They're not sure if they are the right gender. Like, to a person, they're like, I'm not really sure what's going on here, but they can't do math. How are you going to succeed in 2021 without these skills? These STEM skills are incredibly important. Well, guess what, man? That ain't Joe Biden. That's your school board.
Right.
And that's the Department of Public Instruction here in the state of Wisconsin. So I tell people, you lead where you're at. Wherever you are, you're leading. So President Trump got more votes in the 3rd district in 2020 than he did in 2016. The only congressional district in the nation, in a state that he lost, happened here. So guess what? Your votes count. Your work counts. It does. Don't worry about what's going on in Madison. Don't worry what's going around in the state and people get all, distracted by these things. Lead where you're at. Get up off your hoopty. Make some phone calls for candidates. Donate money for them. I was just knocking doors up in Eau Claire for local candidates. It's a 3.5 hour drive, and I don't care because America's worth the work. And if you're not willing to put in the work, I don't want to hear you gripe. I don't. No. But I'm encouraging. I want you to know that I'm standing with you. I'm not going anywhere. I will stand with you. I will stand up for voter integrity. I will stand up for your rights, your constitutional rights. I've done it my entire adult life. I'm not going anywhere. And there is hope because when we apply ourselves, we win. Now we know what these other folks, the depths that they're willing to bend to. Like that stuff with Ron Kanye during that campaign, I was shocked that there are people that would just flat out lie. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was growing up and when I was in the SEAL teams, That did not fly.
Right.
It just didn't, because we were operating under a different set of standards. But I want people to know, if we are willing collectively to put in the work, and I mean work, it's going to be okay. It is. I'm an eternal optimist. I have every single reason from my upbringing, dirt poor, single mom, abject poverty, all that stuff, through all the weird things that happened to me in my life. I have every single reason to be pessimistic. Every single reason. I'm in pain every day because I broke my back, all this stuff, right? I have every reason, but I'm not, because I choose to not be glum. I choose to look at what is good. I choose to do what is right. I choose my country over myself. And when you do that, it really makes a difference. And I want them to be encouraged. But I also want them to know, there's a price for that encouragement, and that's your work.
Right.
Yeah. It's that simple. I mean, I am so dumb that I can see things clearly because they don't get all convoluted with these highfalutin ideas,
Right.
It's that simple, man.
And I think hitting the nail on the head is that it starts at such a level of school board, city council, all the things that, for the most part, people just kind of breeze over. They, like you said, they wait for in 4 years, we'll find the guy.
Republicans.
Yeah,
Republicans do.
Right. And
not Democrats.
That's why we end up, here in Eau Claire County, and then in Chippewa County. I mean, Chippewa County is a little different, but having Kyle on and saying, like, I was out in front of the courthouse with him, protesting the mask mandate, and he spoke very eloquently, and we kind of got to talking afterwards, and he's like, there's the voices that we have out here that are calling in, because it was all virtual, that are calling in and trying to be part of this, the city council meeting and this board meeting. There's nobody in there that's fighting for the voices that are out here. They're all sitting on a Zoom desk somewhere on a screen like this. Nobody is in there. Not even one person that is argumentative of the other point, that is going to say, hey, what this person said or what this business owner said needs to, be taken into consideration. And that's where we kind of got to talking about his candidacy for city council, and we got him on the show. And it's like, it was a realization for me, like it starts here, and you have to be involved, and it can't just be, what happens. Like you
can't phone in America, man.
You can't. You got to put boots on the ground, and you got to put the work in. It's that way with everything. If you aren't happy with, how you feel in the morning, like, or how you eat, or how your weight, there's things that you can do, but you have to put in the work. If you have a small business and you want it to grow, like, you have to put in the work. If you want to have some control, or have the people have a voice for you, you have to put in work.
The work. Yeah. That's simple. I mean, it's totally, I don't know how to explain it.
It is. It's a simple process. It's so simple. Just
put it in the Axon's razor sort of thing. The most likely answer is the answer, generally speaking. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Derrick Van Orden, hey man, thank you so much for the time and the great stories and the great insight, man. I would love to have you back. You and I could probably go on for hours, because we didn't even start to talk about some of the policies that are going on right now. There was a big one that happened today in the state of Wisconsin, which was the repeal of the emergency orders and the mask mandate, and Evers overstepping his grounds. We could go on for days for that. So I'd love to have you back on sometime when we can talk current issues and stuff, and maybe we'll try to do around the election so we can help spread the word on that as well. But thank you so much for everything.
Hey, you're absolutely welcome, and let's do this again before April 6th.
Absolutely. I will get a hold of Mary Pat. We'll put it on the calendar.
Because I'm telling you, man, that's it. This guy, I didn't talk. I'm going to do this 1 second. We have 15 seconds, it looks like. Judge Gill. Judge Gill is running for the Court of Appeals. I talked to that guy several times, and if you are familiar with the dude named Antonin Scalia, who was a Supreme Court justice, who's a person that reads the Constitution or the law and takes it for what it says. Not what they want it to say, not what they think it should say, not how it would apply, in this 5 seconds of time by, a year later. He reads it for what it is. He's a brilliant jurist, and he's a guy that we need to get on the court. So you're going to right now get a absentee in-person ballot, or you're going to go on April 6th. You're going to vote for Judge Gill and Deb Kerr. Kyle Woodman up there. We got a whole slew of people. Karen's running for school board and all these people, but it would be neat to kind of run through a roster of folks. We can do it like a fantasy football team or something. I've never played fantasy football.
And next up on the board, we have
exactly.
Derrick Van Orden. Good. Thank you so much. Follow him on Facebook, Derrick Van Orden. Just search for him and follow also on Instagram. I appreciate your time, sir. Take care of yourself. My best to the family. We'll get you back on here soon, man.
Right on. Thanks. Have a wonderful night.
Take care very much. Derrick Van Orden, Vano, if you will. Fantastic conversation. Lots of great insight. Thank you all we had a bunch of comments coming through, but man was letting it fly, and I was just enjoying every minute of it. Hopefully you did too. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central right here on the show. We have Travis Chappelle on. If you're a streamer, if you're a podcaster, he's got a whole lot of insight about getting guests on your show. And really for me, it's just what he said is do the work, and voila. You get things like what just happened today. Hour and a half nonstop with Derrick Van Orden. So great stuff. Thank you all. Joe, I want to get the book too. I'm gonna talk to his person and see if we can't get that on here. We have cousin Josh on the Twitch too, Sweetser. I love it, man. I love it. Matt was in here too. Brothers and sisters for life. I know it. You know it. Absolutely. Thank you all for being a part of the show today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Travis Chappelle is on 5:10. Join us if you will. Please join the Patreon. Help support the show. Help keep things going. The more we go, the more we grow. And it's all thanks to you. I appreciate you. Take care of yourselves and one another. We'll do it again tomorrow.